It was supposed to be a quiet walk home from school. Elena clutched her daughter's hand tightly, both of them keeping to the edge of the driveway outside Bexford Enterprises. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the corporate parking lot, and Emma's small backpack bounced against her shoulders as she skipped beside her mother. "Mommy, why don't we drive home like the other kids?" Emma asked, her voice innocent and curious. Elena's heart tightened. How could she explain that their car had been repossessed 2 months ago? That her ex-husband Richard, who worked in that very building, refused to pay proper child support while he spent money on expensive dinners and gifts for his new girlfriend? "Walking is good exercise, sweetheart," Elena said, forcing a smile. "And we get to see all the pretty flowers along the way." They were almost past the main entrance when Elena heard the roar of an engine. A sleek red sports car was speeding toward them, and there was a large puddle of muddy water right beside the sidewalk from yesterday's rain. Elena's instincts kicked in. She pulled Emma closer, trying to move them both away from the curb. But the car didn't slow down. Instead, it swerved deliberately toward the puddle. The splash was massive. Dirty water hit Elena and Emma with such force that they both stumbled backward. Elena's work clothes were soaked through, and Emma's school uniform was covered in mud and grime. The little girl started crying immediately, shocked and cold. Through the water dripping from her hair, Elena saw the car slow down. The driver's window rolled down, and a woman with perfectly styled blonde hair and expensive sunglasses looked out. She wasn't apologetic. She was laughing. "Oops," the woman said with a cruel smile. "Maybe you should stay out of the road." Elena recognized her immediately. Bianca Hamilton. The woman who had destroyed her marriage. The woman who now lived in the house that Elena had helped design and decorate. The woman who wore the jewelry that Elena's husband had promised to buy for their anniversary but never did. "That wasn't an accident," Elena said, her voice steady despite her anger. "You did that on purpose." Bianca's laugh was sharp and cold. "Prove it." She looked at Emma, who was still crying and shivering. "Maybe teach your daughter to walk somewhere else. This is where important people work." The car window rolled up, and Bianca drove away, leaving Elena and Emma standing on the sidewalk, dripping wet and humiliated. But what none of them knew was that someone had been watching from the executive floor of Bexford Enterprises. Mr. James Ellison, the company's CEO and majority owner, had been standing at his office window, reviewing some documents when he heard the car engine. He had seen the entire scene unfold. The deliberate swerve toward the puddle. The woman and child getting soaked. The blonde woman's cruel laughter. And most importantly, he had recognized the woman who had been targeted. Elena Rivers. His former employee. The brilliant analyst who had helped develop 3 of the company's most successful products before disappearing 3 years ago without explanation. The woman whose insights had saved the company millions of dollars. The woman who had been quiet, professional, and incredibly talented. Ellison reached for his phone and called his assistant. "Sarah, I need you to pull Elena Rivers' employment file. She worked here until 3 years ago. I want to know everything about why she left." As he watched Elena help her daughter clean off some of the mud with tissues from her purse, Ellison felt a deep anger building in his chest. He had built Bexford Enterprises on the principle of treating people with respect and dignity. Seeing someone deliberately humiliate a woman and child outside his company's building was unacceptable. But there was something more. He remembered Elena's work, her quiet competence, her innovative thinking. She had been one of the best employees he had ever had. Her sudden departure had been a significant loss, though he had never understood why she left. Now, seeing her in what appeared to be difficult circumstances, he began to wonder if there was more to the story. Ellison watched as Elena bent down to comfort her daughter, speaking softly to her and wiping away her tears. Even soaked and humiliated, there was dignity in the way she handled the situation. She didn't yell or cause a scene. She simply focused on taking care of her child. The blonde woman in the sports car, on the other hand, had shown nothing but cruelty and arrogance. The license plate on her car read Bianca 1, and Ellison made a mental note to find out who she was and what connection she might have to his company. As Elena and Emma walked away, Elena's arm protectively around her daughter's shoulders, Ellison made a decision. He was going to find out exactly what had happened to Elena Rivers, and he was going to make sure that whoever had treated her this way would face consequences. The game was about to change, and the people who thought they held all the power were about to learn that true strength came from integrity, not cruelty. Within an hour, Ellison had Elena Rivers' complete employment file on his desk. As he read through it, his memory of her contributions became clearer and his anger grew stronger. Elena had been hired 4 years ago as a junior analyst, but her performance had been exceptional from day one. She had identified critical flaws in the company's supply chain that saved them $2 million in the first year. Her market analysis had guided their expansion into 3 new regions, all of which had exceeded profit projections. But what impressed Ellison most was a note in her file from her former supervisor. Elena Rivers possesses an unusual combination of analytical brilliance and practical wisdom. She sees solutions that others miss and communicates them clearly. She would be an asset to any company lucky enough to have her. So why had she left so suddenly? Ellison called his HR director, Margaret Chin, into his office. Margaret was a woman in her 50s who had been with the company for 15 years and knew everyone's business. Margaret, I need to ask you about Elena Rivers. She left 3 years ago and I want to know why. Margaret's expression grew uncomfortable. Mr. Ellison, that's a complicated situation. Make it simple for me. Margaret sat down and took a deep breath. Elena was married to Richard Monroe, who works in our sales department. About 3 years ago, Richard started having an affair with Bianca Hamilton from our marketing team. Elena found out about it and things got very messy. Ellison's jaw tightened. Richard Monroe was currently the VP of sales, having been promoted twice in the past 3 years. Bianca Hamilton was the woman he had just seen humiliating Elena and her daughter. What exactly happened? Elena never made a formal complaint, but the situation was affecting her work. She was constantly distracted, and there were rumors that Richard was pressuring her to quit so he could pursue his relationship with Bianca openly. Eventually she resigned. She said she needed to focus on her daughter. And Richard. Richard told everyone that Elena had become unstable and jealous. He said she was making accusations against him and Bianca that weren't true. Most people believed him because Elena never defended herself publicly. Ellison felt sick. Elena had been one of his best employees, and she had been driven out by office politics and a cheating husband. Meanwhile, Richard had been promoted to a position where he now earned 3 times what Elena had been making. What's Richard's performance been like since his promotion? Margaret hesitated. He's adequate. He meets his basic targets, but he hasn't brought in any major new accounts. The innovative strategies we used to see from the sales team have disappeared. Honestly, some of us have wondered if Elena was the real brain behind some of his earlier successes. Ellison asked Margaret to send him Richard's performance reviews and sales reports from the past 3 years. He also requested Elena's current contact information, though he wasn't sure what he planned to do with it yet. After Margaret left, Ellison stood at his window again, looking down at the spot where Elena and her daughter had been humiliated. His phone buzzed with a text from his private investigator, whom he had contacted after the incident. Elena Rivers, 29, works 3 jobs to support her daughter Emma, age 7. Currently employed at City General Hospital as a night janitor, tutors math students on weekends, and does freelance data analysis from home. Lives in a small apartment on the east side. Ex-husband Richard Monroe pays minimal child support despite court orders requiring more. 3 jobs. Elena was working 3 jobs while her ex-husband, who was making over $150,000 a year, paid minimal child support. The woman who had helped build Bexford Enterprises' success was now cleaning toilets at night to make ends meet. Ellison's phone rang. It was his assistant, Sarah. Mr. Ellison, I've been looking into that license plate you asked about. The red sports car belongs to Bianca Hamilton. She's been posting photos on social media of expensive vacations and shopping trips. It looks like she's been spending quite a bit of money lately. Money that probably should have been going to child support, Ellison muttered. Sir? Never mind. Sarah, I want you to schedule a meeting with Richard Monroe for tomorrow morning. Tell him I want to discuss his department's performance. After hanging up, Ellison continued reading Elena's file. There was a photo of her from the company Christmas party 3 years ago. She was smiling, wearing a simple blue dress, standing next to Richard. She looked happy then, confident and professional. He remembered her now more clearly. She had been quiet in meetings, but when she spoke, people listened. Her insights were always valuable, and she had a way of explaining complex problems in simple terms that everyone could understand. And now she was cleaning offices at night while the man who had cheated on her and the woman who had humiliated her daughter lived in luxury. Ellison made another call to his investigator. I want to know everything about Richard Monroe's finances. How much he's spending, where the money is going, and whether he's been honest about his income in his child support filings. You want me to dig deep? As deep as you need to go. And be discreet. I don't want anyone knowing I'm looking into this. As the sun set over the city, Ellison sat in his office thinking about justice and second chances. Elena Rivers had been wronged not just by her husband, but by the system that had allowed her to be driven out of a job she excelled at. Tomorrow he would start making things right. Richard Monroe had been riding high for 3 years, but that was about to change. And Elena Rivers was about to discover that sometimes, when you least expect it, someone is watching who has the power to change everything. The real question was, would Elena be willing to let him help her? Richard Monroe walked into Ellison's office the next morning with the confident swagger of a man who believed he was untouchable. At 32, he was handsome in a conventional way, with perfectly styled hair and an expensive suit that probably cost more than Elena spent on groceries in 3 months. "Mr. Ellison, good to see you," Richard said, extending his hand with a politician's smile. "I hear you wanted to discuss the sales department's performance. I'm happy to report that we're meeting all our targets this quarter." Ellison didn't smile back. He gestured to the chair across from his desk. "Sit down, Richard. We need to talk." Richard's confidence wavered slightly at Ellison's serious tone, but he sat down and crossed his legs casually. "Of course. What can I help you with?" Ellison opened a file on his desk. "I've been reviewing your department's performance over the past 3 years. You were promoted to VP of Sales based on some impressive results in your first 2 years with the company." "That's right. I've always been a hard worker. Tell me about the Morrison account. The one that brought in $2.3 million in revenue." Richard's eyes lit up. "That was one of my biggest successes. I identified the client's needs and developed a comprehensive solution that exceeded their expectations." Ellison nodded slowly. "And the Chin Industries contract? The one worth $1.8 million? Another great example of my strategic thinking. I saw an opportunity that others missed." "What about the supply chain optimization project that saved the company $2 million? Richard paused for just a moment. "That was a team effort, but I played a key role in implementing the changes." Ellison closed the file and looked directly at Richard. "That's interesting because I have the original project proposals for all 3 of those initiatives. They're all written in the same handwriting, and they're all signed by Elena Rivers." The color drained from Richard's face. "Elena assisted with some of the research, but the ideas were mine." "Really?" "Because I also have emails from Elena to her supervisor, detailing her analysis and recommendations. The dates show she completed all the work weeks before you presented the proposals as your own." Richard's hands began to fidget with his tie. "Mr. Ellison, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Elena and I were married at the time, so we collaborated on projects. It was a partnership." "A partnership where you took credit for her work and she got nothing? That's not how it happened." Ellison leaned forward. "Then explain to me how it did happen. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like Elena Rivers was the real talent behind your early success, and once she left, your performance became merely adequate." Richard's face flushed red. "Elena was a good analyst, but she didn't have the people skills to handle major clients. I was the one who closed the deals. Using her strategies and her research. We were a team. A team where one person did the work and the other person took the credit." Ellison's voice was ice cold. "Tell me, Richard, why did Elena really leave the company?" Richard shifted uncomfortably in his chair. "She chose to leave. She said she wanted to focus on raising our daughter. Or did she leave because you made her life here unbearable? Because you were having an affair with Bianca Hamilton and pressuring Elena to quit so you could pursue your relationship openly?" Richard's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not, who told you that? It doesn't matter who told me. What matters is that one of my best employees was driven out of this company by office politics and a cheating husband. Elena was becoming unstable, Richard said, his voice rising. She was making accusations, causing drama. It was affecting the whole department. The only drama I see is a man who stole his wife's work, cheated on her, and then had her forced out of her job. Ellison stood up and walked to the window. "Tell me about your current performance, Richard. This year's numbers." Richard cleared his throat. "We're meeting our targets." "Barely. And you haven't brought in a single major new account in 18 months. The innovative strategies that made you look so good in your first 2 years have completely disappeared. The market is more competitive now. Or maybe you don't have Elena to do your thinking for you anymore." Richard shot to his feet. "That's not fair. I've worked hard for this company." "Have you?" "Because I've been looking at your expense reports, and I see a lot of expensive dinners, client entertainment, and travel. But I don't see results that justify those expenses. Those are legitimate business expenses." "Are they?" "Because my investigator tells me that some of those client dinners were actually personal dates with Bianca Hamilton." Richard's face went pale again. You've been investigating me? I've been investigating why one of my best employees left the company and why her replacement isn't performing at the same level. Elena's not my replacement. I was promoted based on my own merits. Were you? Or were you promoted based on Elena's merits while she was working 3 jobs to support the daughter you refused to adequately support? Richard's hands were shaking now. My personal life is none of your business. It becomes my business when it affects my company. And it becomes my business when employees of this company are humiliating women and children in our parking lot. What are you talking about? I saw what Bianca did yesterday. I saw her deliberately splash Elena and her daughter with muddy water. I saw her laugh about it. Richard looked confused. I don't know what you're talking about. Then you better find out. Because I'm putting you on notice, Richard. Your performance is under review and your conduct is being questioned. If you want to keep your job, you better start proving that you deserve it. Are you threatening me? I'm warning you. This company was built on treating people with respect and dignity. Anyone who can't meet that standard doesn't belong here. Richard straightened his tie and tried to regain his composure. I've been nothing but professional in my work here. Have you? Because I'm going to be watching very closely from now on. And if I find out that you've been using company resources for personal purposes, or if I see any more harassment of former employees, there will be consequences. I haven't harassed anyone. Make sure you don't start. Richard left the office looking shaken and confused. Allison watched him go, knowing that the conversation had accomplished exactly what he intended. Richard was now on notice that his behavior was being scrutinized, and his confidence had been shaken. But this was just the beginning. Allison had bigger plans for both Richard Monroe and Elena Rivers. Elena stood in line at the small coffee shop on 3rd Street, counting the bills in her wallet. She had exactly $4.50, enough for a small coffee and maybe a muffin if she was lucky. It was her only break between her tutoring session with Mrs. Peterson's son and her shift at the hospital, and she needed the caffeine to get through the next 12 hours. The coffee shop was busy with the afternoon rush, filled with business people and college students. Elena kept her head down, aware that her clothes were worn and her shoes had seen better days. She had learned to be invisible in places like this. Elena? She looked up, surprised to hear her name. A tall man in an expensive suit was standing behind her in line, and it took her a moment to recognize him. Mr. Ellison? She couldn't hide her shock. James Ellison was the CEO of Bexford Enterprises, one of the most powerful men in the city. She had only spoken to him a few times when she worked there, usually in large meetings where her contributions were acknowledged with a nod. Please call me James. And please let me buy your coffee. I was hoping to run into you. Elena's first instinct was to decline. She had learned to be suspicious of unexpected kindness, especially from wealthy men. That's very kind of you, but I can pay for my own coffee. I'm sure you can. But I'd like to talk to you if you have a few minutes. Elena hesitated. She had 15 minutes before she needed to catch the bus to the hospital. I can't stay long. That's fine. What would you like? Despite her pride, Elena was practical. If he was offering, she might as well get something that would actually help her get through the night. A large coffee, black, and a turkey sandwich if they have one. James ordered for both of them and found a small table in the corner. Elena sat down awkwardly, wondering what this was about. I saw what happened yesterday, James said without preamble. Outside the company building. With the car and the puddle. Elena's face flushed with embarrassment. I'm sorry about that. I hope it didn't reflect badly on the company. It didn't reflect badly on you. It reflected badly on the person who did it. Elena looked down at her coffee. These things happen. No, they don't. Or they shouldn't. James leaned forward. Elena, I remember your work at Bexford. You were brilliant. Your market analysis for the Morrison account was some of the best strategic thinking I've ever seen. Elena's head snapped up. You remember that? I remember all of it. The supply chain optimization, the Chin Industries proposal, the risk assessment that saved us from that disastrous merger. You were one of the best analysts we've ever had. Elena's eyes filled with tears, but she blinked them back. Thank you. That means a lot. Why did you leave? The question hung in the air between them. Elena took a sip of her coffee, buying time. I needed to focus on my daughter. That's the official reason. What's the real reason? Elena looked at him carefully. James Ellison was known for being direct and honest in his business dealings. But this felt personal, and she wasn't sure she trusted him with the truth. Sometimes situations become impossible, she said finally. Sometimes it's better to walk away. Even when walking away means giving up something you love? Elena's voice was quiet. Especially then. James nodded as if he understood. I've been doing some thinking about our company's talent retention. We've lost some good people over the years and I think we need to do better. I'm sure you'll figure it out. I was hoping you might help me with that. Elena almost choked on her coffee. What? I have a consulting position available. Part-time, flexible hours. Someone with your skills and experience to help us identify areas where we can improve our employee satisfaction and retention. Elena stared at him. You want me to come back to work for you? As a consultant. You'd be independent, well compensated, and you'd have the authority to make real changes. I can't, Elena said immediately. I appreciate the offer, but I can't. Why not? Elena's voice was firm. Because I won't put myself or my daughter in that situation again. I won't work somewhere where I have to see, where I have to deal with. Your ex-husband? Elena nodded, not trusting herself to speak. What if I told you that situation was going to change? What do you mean? James chose his words carefully. I mean that people who don't perform at the level this company requires don't stay employed here for long. Elena's eyes widened. You're going to fire Richard? I'm going to evaluate everyone's performance based on results, not politics. If someone isn't meeting expectations, they'll be given a chance to improve. If they don't, they'll be replaced. And Bianca? The same applies to everyone. Elena was quiet for a long moment. Why are you doing this? Because it's the right thing to do. Because you deserve better than what happened to you. And because this company needs people like you. I don't know, Elena said. I need to think about it. Of course. But Elena, I want you to know that you don't have to live like this. Working 3 jobs, barely making ends meet, being treated like you're invisible. You have value, and you deserve to be compensated for that value. Elena's phone buzzed. She looked at it and stood up quickly. I have to go. I'm going to be late for work. Which job? Night shift at the hospital. I clean the offices and patient rooms. James watched her gather her things, seeing the dignity in the way she carried herself despite her circumstances. Elena, take my card. Call me when you're ready to talk. Elena took the card but didn't look at it. Thank you for the coffee. Thank you for listening. As Elena hurried out of the coffee shop, James sat alone at the table thinking about the conversation. He had seen the pain in her eyes when she talked about her reasons for leaving, and he had seen the hope she was trying to hide when he offered her the consulting position. He also saw the fear. Elena had been hurt badly and she wasn't going to trust easily. But James was patient and he was determined. Elena Rivers was going to get the justice she deserved, even if she wasn't ready to believe it yet. The next phase of his plan was already in motion. 2 weeks later, Elena found herself standing in the lobby of Bexford Enterprises, holding a visitor's badge and trying to calm her racing heart. She had called James Ellison 3 days ago, driven to accept his offer when Emma needed antibiotics for a severe ear infection and Elena didn't have the money for the prescription. The lobby looked the same as it had 3 years ago, all marble and glass and expensive furniture. But Elena felt different. She was wearing her best dress, the navy blue one she had bought for job interviews, and she had borrowed money from her neighbor to get her hair done. She was determined to look professional, even if she felt terrified. Elena? A woman's voice made her turn. It was Margaret Chin from HR, smiling warmly. It's so good to see you again. Hello, Margaret. It's good to see you too. Mr. Ellison is waiting for you upstairs. He's very excited that you decided to accept the consulting position. As they rode the elevator to the executive floor, Margaret chatted about changes in the company. We've made some adjustments in the sales department, she said carefully. Richard Monroe is being given additional training and oversight. Elena nodded, not sure what to say. She had wondered what would happen when Richard found out she was coming back, even as a consultant. James Ellison's office was exactly as she remembered it, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. James himself looked pleased to see her, standing up from behind his desk with a genuine smile. Elena, thank you for coming. I'm glad you decided to accept the position. Thank you for the opportunity. I have to admit, I'm a little nervous. That's understandable. But you belong here. You always did. James had prepared a complete orientation for her. Her consulting office was on the 3rd floor, with a view of the garden and all the resources she would need. Her first project was to evaluate the company's current employee satisfaction and make recommendations for improvement. I want you to have complete access to all departments, James explained. Interview employees, review policies, examine our retention data. I want to know why good people leave and what we can do to keep them. Elena felt a surge of excitement. This was exactly the kind of strategic work she had loved and missed. I'll need to review exit interviews, compensation data, and employee survey results. Whatever you need. Margaret will help you access everything. As they walked through the building, Elena was surprised by how many people remembered her. Former colleagues greeted her warmly, expressing genuine pleasure that she was back. She had forgotten how much she had enjoyed working with these people. But then she heard familiar voices coming from the sales department. I can't believe Ellison brought her back. Richard's voice was angry and frustrated. She's going to cause nothing but problems. Maybe she's just here temporarily. Bianca's voice was sharp with worry. Maybe it's not a big deal. It's a big deal if she starts talking about old projects and claiming credit for work that was done years ago. Elena stopped walking, her heart pounding. James noticed her hesitation. Elena, are you all right? I'm fine. Just listening. Richard's voice continued. I need to talk to her, make sure she understands how things work around here now. You think she'll cause trouble? Bianca asked. I think she's bitter about the divorce and looking for revenge. But I can handle her. Elena's face flushed with anger. After everything that had happened, Richard still thought he could intimidate her. James had heard the conversation too, and his expression was grim. Elena, you don't have to put up with that. If anyone makes you uncomfortable, you tell me immediately. I can handle myself, Elena said, her voice stronger than she felt. I'm sure you can. But you shouldn't have to. They continued the tour, and Elena threw herself into her work. She scheduled interviews with employees from every department, reviewed 3 years of retention data, and analyzed the company's current policies. The work was challenging and engaging, and she felt her confidence returning. But the real test came at the end of her first week, when she was working late in her office and heard a knock on her door. Come in. Richard walked in and Elena's stomach tightened. He looked angry and determined, like a man who had come to establish dominance. Elena, we need to talk. Hello, Richard. What can I do for you? You can explain what you're really doing here. Elena kept her voice professional. I'm working on an employee satisfaction consulting project for Mr. Ellison. Cut the crap. I know why you're here. You're trying to get back at me for the divorce. Elena looked at him calmly. Richard, I'm here to do a job. That's all. You expect me to believe that? After all the things you said about me? After the way you tried to poison people against me? I never said anything about you to anyone. You told people I was cheating. I told people the truth. Richard's face reddened. That's in the past. We're both moved on. I'm with Bianca now, and you need to accept that. I accepted it 3 years ago when I left. Then why are you back? Elena stood up, feeling stronger than she had in years. Because I'm good at my job, Richard. Because I have value. Because I deserve to be here. You think you can just waltz back in here and pick up where you left off? I think I can do the work I was hired to do without any interference from you. Richard stepped closer to her desk. This is my department, Elena. These are my people. You don't belong here anymore. According to Mr. Ellison, I do. Ellison doesn't know what you're really like. He doesn't know how vindictive you can be. Elena's voice was ice cold. The only vindictive person in this room is you, Richard. You stole my work, destroyed my marriage, and tried to ruin my reputation. But I'm not that scared woman anymore. You're going to regret coming back here. Is that a threat? Richard realized he had gone too far. It's a warning. Things are different now. I'm not the same person I was when we were married. Neither am I. Richard left her office without another word, and Elena sat down at her desk, her hands shaking slightly. But she wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking from anger and determination. Richard Monroe had underestimated her once before. He wasn't going to get the chance to do it again. Over the next month, Elena threw herself into her work with a passion she hadn't felt in years. Her employee satisfaction report was comprehensive and insightful, identifying key areas where the company could improve retention and morale. But as she dug deeper into the data, she began to notice irregularities that had nothing to do with her original project. The sales department's expense reports showed patterns that didn't make sense. Client dinners that happened on weekends. Travel expenses to destinations where the company had no clients. Conference registrations for events that didn't exist. Elena had always been good with numbers, and these numbers were telling a story that made her stomach turn. Richard wasn't just performing poorly, he was stealing from the company. She spent 3 days double-checking her findings, cross-referencing credit card statements with actual business activities. The evidence was overwhelming. Richard had been using company funds for personal expenses, disguising them as legitimate business costs. The amounts were significant. Over the past 2 years, he had fraudulently claimed nearly $45,000 in fake expenses. Money that could have funded employee bonuses, equipment upgrades, or training programs. Elena sat in her office, staring at the spreadsheet on her computer screen. Part of her wanted to ignore what she had found. Reporting Richard would create a massive scandal, and despite everything he had done to her, she didn't want to be responsible for destroying his career. But then she thought about Emma, and how many times she had to tell her daughter they couldn't afford things that other kids had. She thought about the nights she had worked until exhaustion, trying to make ends meet while Richard lived in luxury. She thought about the deliberate humiliation in the parking lot, the cruel laughter, the complete lack of remorse. Elena picked up her phone and called James Ellison. "James, I need to see you. I've found something that's not related to my original project, but I think you need to know about it. Come up to my office. I'll clear my schedule." 20 minutes later, Elena sat across from James, her laptop open between them. Her hands were steady as she walked him through the evidence. "This pattern started about 18 months ago," she explained, pointing to the screen. "Small amounts at first but getting larger and more frequent. He's been very careful to stay under the amounts that would trigger automatic audits." James examined the data carefully. "This is thorough work, Elena. How did you find this?" "I was looking at departmental spending patterns as part of the employee satisfaction analysis. Sales was spending significantly more per employee than other departments, so I dug deeper." "And you're certain about this?" "I've triple-checked everything. The evidence is solid." James leaned back in his chair. "Elena, I need to ask you something, and I want you to be completely honest with me." "Of course. Are you bringing this to me because it's the right thing to do, or because Richard is your ex-husband?" Elena had expected this question. "A month ago I might have said it was about revenge. But it's not. It's about integrity. If this was anyone else, I would still be sitting here showing you this evidence. You realize what this means? Richard will likely be terminated and could face criminal charges." "I realize that. And you're prepared for the fallout? People will assume you're doing this out of spite." Elena's voice was firm. "People can assume whatever they want. The numbers don't lie." James nodded slowly. "I believe you. And I think you're doing the right thing." He closed the laptop. "I'm going to need you to prepare a complete report documenting all of this. I'll need to involve our legal team and potentially law enforcement. I can have the report ready by tomorrow. Elena, I want you to know that this couldn't have been easy for you. It wasn't. But it was necessary." As Elena prepared to leave, James stopped her. "There's something else. I've been watching Richard's work performance since our conversation last month. Your analysis was correct. Without your ideas and research, he's been struggling. His last 3 client presentations have been subpar, and we've lost 2 accounts that should have been easy wins." "What does that mean?" "It means that his position as VP of Sales was probably never justified. He got promoted based on work that was largely yours, and now that he's on his own, he's not performing at the level we need." Elena felt a complex mix of emotions. Vindication but also sadness. She had once loved Richard, and seeing him fall so far was painful, even after everything he had done. "I should get back to work," she said. "Elena, one more thing. I want you to know that your work here has been exceptional. The employee satisfaction report is some of the best strategic analysis I've seen in years. I'd like to discuss making your consulting position permanent." Elena's heart jumped. "Really? Really? We need people like you, people with integrity, intelligence, and the courage to do what's right even when it's difficult." As Elena walked back to her office, she felt a sense of purpose she hadn't experienced in years. She was no longer the woman who had been driven out of her job by a cheating husband. She was a professional who had just exposed fraud and was being recognized for her contributions. But she also knew that the hardest part was still ahead. When Richard found out what she had discovered, the gloves would come off completely. 3 hours later, Elena was deep in preparing the fraud report when her office door burst open. Richard stormed in, his face red with anger, followed by Bianca. "You vindictive bitch!" Richard shouted. "I know what you're doing." Elena remained calm. "Please lower your voice, Richard. This is a place of business. Don't give me that professional crap. You're trying to destroy me. I'm documenting irregularities in expense reports. If that threatens you, maybe you should examine your own behavior." Bianca stepped forward. "Elena, you need to stop this witch hunt. Richard has done nothing wrong. Then he has nothing to worry about. You're making accusations based on jealousy and bitterness, Richard snarled. Everyone knows you can't handle the fact that I moved on. Elena stood up, her voice steady and strong. Richard, I stopped caring about your personal life the day I filed for divorce. This is about business ethics and company policy. You think you're so smart, don't you? Coming back here, acting like you're some kind of savior? I think I'm good at my job. I think I notice things that other people miss. And I think that makes some people uncomfortable. You're going to regret this, Elena. I have friends in this company. I have influence. Do you? Because from where I'm sitting, it looks like your influence is about to run out. Richard's face was purple with rage. You always thought you were better than me, didn't you? Smarter, more talented, more everything. I never thought I was better than you, Richard. I thought we were partners. I thought we were building something together. But you taught me that some people will take credit for other people's work and then throw them away when they're no longer useful. That's not what happened. Isn't it? Because I have documentation of every project I worked on, every idea I contributed, every analysis I provided. And I have documentation of how you presented that work as your own. Bianca grabbed Richard's arm. We should go. This isn't helping. But Richard wasn't finished. You think you've won, don't you? You think you can just waltz back in here and destroy everything I've built? I'm not destroying anything, Richard. I'm revealing what was already there. I built my career on hard work and talent. You built your career on my work and my talent. And now that I'm not here to carry you, the truth is becoming obvious. Richard took a step toward her desk, and Elena saw something dangerous in his eyes. But before he could speak, James Ellison appeared in the doorway. Mr. Monroe, Miss Hamilton, I need to see both of you in my office immediately. Richard and Bianca left without another word, but Elena could see the fear in their eyes. They knew their time was up. Elena sat back down at her desk, her hands shaking slightly. But she wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking from the realization that she had just stood up to the man who had once made her feel powerless, and she had won. The truth was finally coming out, and Elena Rivers was no longer afraid. The next morning, Elena arrived at the office to find the building buzzing with tension. Word had spread quickly through the company grapevine that Richard Monroe and Bianca Hamilton had been called into emergency meetings with senior management the previous afternoon. Elena tried to focus on her work, but she couldn't shake the feeling that she was at the center of a storm. Around 10 o'clock, Margaret Chin appeared at her office door. Elena, Mr. Ellison would like to see you in conference room A. He has some people he'd like you to meet. Elena's stomach tightened. She had been expecting this, but that didn't make it any less intimidating. She gathered her files and followed Margaret down the hall. Conference room A was filled with serious-looking people in expensive suits. Elena recognized the company's head of legal, the CFO, and two people she didn't know but who looked like they might be investigators or attorneys. James Ellison stood up when she entered. Elena, thank you for coming. I'd like you to meet our external auditor, Miss Patricia Williams, and our corporate attorney, Mr. David Kim. They've been reviewing the information you provided. Elena shook hands with both of them, trying to project confidence she didn't entirely feel. Ms. Rivers, Patricia Williams said, your analysis of the expense irregularities is extremely thorough. We've been able to verify most of your findings through our independent review. Most of them? All of them, actually. In fact, we found additional irregularities that you hadn't identified yet. The total amount of fraudulent expenses appears to be closer to $65,000 over the past 2 years. Elena felt sick. The theft was even worse than she had thought. David Kim opened a file folder. Ms. Rivers, we need to ask you some questions about your relationship with Richard Monroe and your knowledge of these financial irregularities. Of course. How long have you known about these expense discrepancies? I discovered them 3 days ago while conducting my employee satisfaction analysis. I reported them to Mr. Ellison immediately. And you had no previous knowledge of any financial irregularities? None whatsoever. What about your marriage to Mr. Monroe? Did you ever have access to his company credit cards or expense reports? Elena's voice was steady. Richard and I kept our personal and professional finances completely separate. I never had access to his company accounts, and he never discussed specific business expenses with me. Patricia Williams leaned forward. Ms. Rivers, we need to ask you directly, are you bringing these irregularities to light because of your personal relationship with Mr. Monroe? Elena had prepared for this question. I discovered these discrepancies in the course of my professional duties. I reported them because it was the right thing to do. My personal relationship with Richard ended 3 years ago, and I have no interest in revenge or personal gain. But you must admit that your ex-husband's termination would benefit you personally, particularly regarding child support payments. Elena's jaw tightened. My ex-husband's employment status has no bearing on his legal obligation to support his daughter. Whether he works here or anywhere else, he still owes the same amount of child support. James Ellison spoke up. I want to be clear about something. Elena discovered these irregularities while conducting legitimate business analysis. She brought them to my attention immediately and professionally. Her personal relationship with Richard Monroe is irrelevant to the validity of the evidence. David Kim nodded. We agree. The financial evidence speaks for itself, regardless of who discovered it. What happens now? Elena asked. We're conducting a full forensic audit of all departmental expenses for the past 3 years, Patricia Williams explained. We'll also be reviewing personnel files and interviewing employees. Will Richard be arrested? That depends on what the full audit reveals and whether the district attorney decides to pursue criminal charges. Elena felt a strange mix of relief and apprehension. She had done what she thought was right, but the consequences were going to be severe. Ms. Rivers, David Kim said, we may need you to testify if this goes to trial. Are you prepared for that? If it's necessary, yes. It could be difficult. Defense attorneys will try to portray you as a vindictive ex-wife seeking revenge. Then I'll have to prove them wrong. After the meeting, Elena walked back to her office feeling drained. She had known this would be difficult, but she hadn't anticipated how emotionally exhausting it would be. She was updating her files when her phone rang. It was the receptionist. Elena, there's a woman here to see you. She says her name is Bianca Hamilton. Elena's heart rate quickened. Tell her I'll be right down. Bianca was waiting in the lobby and she looked terrible. Her usually perfect hair was disheveled, her makeup was smudged, and her expensive clothes looked wrinkled. Elena, I need to talk to you. I'm not sure we have anything to discuss. Please. 5 minutes. Against her better judgment, Elena led Bianca to a small conference room off the lobby. Elena, you have to stop this, Bianca said as soon as the door closed. You're destroying Richard's life. I'm not destroying anything. I'm reporting financial irregularities that I discovered in the course of my work. But you know this is about more than money. You're doing this because you're jealous. Elena looked at Bianca with something approaching pity. Bianca, I'm not jealous of you. I feel sorry for you. Sorry for me? You're the one working 3 jobs while I'm living in a beautiful house with the man I love. Are you? Because from what I've seen, you're living in a house that was bought with stolen money, with a man who lies and cheats and steals. How long do you think that's going to last? Bianca's eyes filled with tears. Richard loves me. Richard loves himself. He loved me too until it became convenient to throw me away. He made mistakes in your marriage, but he's changed. Has he? Because embezzling money from his employer doesn't sound like change to me. That's not what happened. Then what did happen? Because I've seen the receipts, Bianca. I've seen the credit card statements. I've seen the fake conference registrations and the non-existent client dinners. Bianca was crying now. He said those were legitimate business expenses. Did you believe him? I trusted him. And now? Bianca didn't answer. Bianca, you're young and you're beautiful and you have your whole life ahead of you. Don't waste it on a man who will throw you away the moment it becomes convenient. He won't do that to me. He will. Because that's who he is. He did it to me and he'll do it to you. But I love him. I loved him too. But love isn't enough when the other person has no integrity. Bianca wiped her eyes. What if I could convince him to pay you more child support? What if he could make things right with you? This isn't about child support, Bianca. This is about the fact that he stole money from his employer. That's a crime, and it has nothing to do with our personal relationship. But if you didn't report it, no one would have known. Someone would have found out eventually. And when they did, it would have been much worse. Bianca left the conference room looking defeated, and Elena felt genuinely sorry for her. Bianca was about to learn the same lesson Elena had learned 3 years ago. Richard Monroe was not the man he pretended to be. But Elena also felt something else. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like she was in control of her own life. She had faced down her fears, stood up to the people who had wronged her, and done what she knew was right. Whatever happened next, she could face it with her head held high. The forensic audit took 2 weeks to complete, and when the results came in, they were even worse than Elena had anticipated. Richard had been stealing from the company for almost 3 years, with the fraud starting just a few months after Elena left. The total amount exceeded $85,000, and the investigators had found evidence of falsified documents, fake vendor payments, and systematic expense fraud. Elena was in her office when James Ellison called her with the news. "Elena, I wanted you to hear this from me first. We're terminating Richard today, and we're turning the evidence over to the district attorney's office." Elena felt a complex mix of emotions. Relief that the truth was finally out, but also sadness that it had come to this. What about Bianca? She's being terminated as well. While we couldn't prove she was directly involved in the financial fraud, she was aware of some of the irregularities and failed to report them. That's a violation of company policy. I see. Elena, I want you to know that this company owes you a debt of gratitude. If you hadn't discovered this fraud, it could have continued for years. I was just doing my job. You were doing the right thing even though it was difficult. That takes courage. An hour later, Elena watched through her office window as Richard and Bianca cleaned out their desks. Richard looked angry and defiant, while Bianca appeared to be in shock. Several employees had gathered to watch the spectacle, and Elena could see the whispered conversations and pointed looks. Richard caught sight of her in the window and glared up at her with pure hatred. Elena didn't look away. She had nothing to be ashamed of. That evening, Elena was at home helping Emma with her homework when her phone rang. It was an unknown number. "Elena, it's Richard. We need to talk. I don't think we have anything to discuss. You destroyed my life. I hope you're happy." Elena's voice was calm. "You destroyed your own life, Richard. I just reported what I found. You could have talked to me first. You could have given me a chance to explain." "Explain what?" "How you stole $85,000 from your employer. How you falsified documents and created fake vendors. I was going to pay it back." "When?" "It's been 3 years, Richard. You weren't paying it back. You were stealing more. I needed the money. Do you know how expensive it is to maintain the lifestyle that job required?" Elena was amazed by his lack of self-awareness. "So you decided to steal it?" "I was going to replace it when I got my next bonus." "Richard, you committed a crime. Multiple crimes. And you're trying to blame me for reporting it? You're vindictive and petty, and you always have been. I'm honest. That's something you never learned to be. This isn't over, Elena. I'm going to fight these charges, and I'm going to make sure everyone knows you did this out of spite. Do whatever you think you need to do. But leave me and Emma alone. Emma is my daughter too. Then act like it. Pay your child support. Be a father to her. Stop stealing and lying and blaming other people for your problems." Richard hung up without another word. The next few weeks were intense. The local business news picked up the story of the Bexford Enterprises fraud case, and Elena found herself at the center of media attention she never wanted. Reporters called her office, trying to get her to comment on the investigation. James Ellison had the company's public relations team handle most of the media inquiries, but Elena still felt exposed and vulnerable. She worried about how the publicity would affect Emma, and she worried about Richard's threats. But she also felt supported in ways she hadn't expected. Her colleagues at Bexford were universally supportive, praising her for her integrity and courage. Several employees told her privately that they had suspected something was wrong with Richard's expenses but hadn't known how to report it. More importantly, Elena's work was being recognized. James had made her consulting position permanent, with a salary that was significantly higher than what she had been making at her 3 part-time jobs. For the first time in years, she could afford to live without constant financial stress. The legal proceedings moved quickly. Richard was arrested and charged with embezzlement, fraud, and theft. He hired an expensive attorney who tried to portray him as a victim of a vindictive ex-wife, but the evidence was overwhelming. Elena had to testify at the preliminary hearing, and it was one of the most difficult things she had ever done. Richard's attorney tried to paint her as bitter and jealous, but Elena remained calm and professional, sticking to the facts. "Ms. Rivers, isn't it true that you reported these alleged irregularities because you wanted revenge against your ex-husband?" "No, that's not true. I reported them because I discovered evidence of fraud in the course of my professional duties. But you must admit that your ex-husband's termination benefits you financially. My ex-husband's employment status has no bearing on his legal obligation to support his daughter." "Come now, Ms. Rivers. Aren't you pleased that Mr. Monroe has lost his job?" Elena looked directly at the attorney. "I'm not pleased that anyone has lost their job. I'm pleased that the truth has come out." The hearing lasted 3 days, and when it was over, Richard was bound over for trial. His attorney advised him to take a plea deal, but Richard refused, insisting he was innocent. Bianca meanwhile had left town. Elena heard through the office grapevine that she had moved back in with her parents in another state, claiming that Richard had deceived her about his financial situation. Elena felt sorry for Bianca, but she also felt vindicated. She had tried to warn her that Richard would eventually throw her away, and that's exactly what had happened. As the legal proceedings continued, Elena focused on rebuilding her life. She moved Emma to a better school district, found a nice apartment with a yard, and for the first time in years she felt financially secure. But more than that, she felt respected. Her work at Bexford was challenging and meaningful, and she was being recognized for her contributions. James Ellison had put her in charge of a major project to improve the company's ethical standards and financial controls. "Elena, I want you to develop a comprehensive program to prevent the kind of fraud that Richard committed," James told her. "I want you to have the authority to implement real changes that will protect the company and its employees." Elena threw herself into the project with enthusiasm. She developed new policies, created training programs, and established clear procedures for reporting irregularities. The work was exactly what she had always wanted to do: strategic, meaningful, and impactful. 6 months after Richard's arrest, Elena was working late when her phone rang. It was Richard's attorney. "Ms. Rivers, my client would like to speak with you about a possible plea agreement." "I'm not the prosecutor. I don't have any say in plea agreements." "I know, but Mr. Monroe would like to apologize to you personally. He's willing to plead guilty to the charges in exchange for a reduced sentence." Elena was quiet for a moment. "Why does he want to apologize to me?" "I think he's finally realized the gravity of what he's done." Elena agreed to meet with Richard and his attorney the next day. She wasn't sure what she expected, but she felt she owed it to herself to hear what he had to say. Richard looked terrible. He had lost weight, his clothes were ill-fitting, and he looked like he hadn't slept in weeks. When he saw Elena, his eyes filled with tears. "Elena, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything." Elena remained calm. "What are you sorry for, Richard?" "For stealing from the company. For lying to you. For destroying our marriage. For not being the father Emma deserves." "Why are you telling me this now?" "Because I've lost everything and I finally understand that it's my fault." "Not yours. Mine." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "Richard, I accept your apology. But I want you to understand something. I didn't report your fraud because I wanted revenge. I reported it because it was the right thing to do. I know that now. And I want you to know that I'm going to be fine. Emma and I are going to be fine. We don't need you to take care of us anymore." Richard nodded, tears streaming down his face. "I know. And I'm glad." 2 weeks later, Richard pleaded guilty to all charges and was sentenced to 2 years in prison. Elena didn't attend the sentencing, but she read about it in the newspaper. That night, as she helped Emma with her homework, her daughter asked, "Mommy, are you sad about Daddy?" Elena thought about the question carefully. "I'm sad that he made bad choices, sweetheart. But I'm not sad about our life now. I like our new apartment." "I do too. And I like that you're not tired all the time anymore." Elena smiled. "I like that too." As she tucked Emma into bed that night, Elena reflected on how much their lives had changed. A year ago, she had been working 3 jobs and struggling to make ends meet. Now she had a career she loved, financial security, and most importantly, her self-respect. Richard Monroe had tried to destroy her, but instead, he had made her stronger. And now, finally, justice had been served. 1 year after Richard's sentencing, Elena stood in her new corner office on the 5th floor of Bexford Enterprises, looking out at the city skyline. She had been promoted to Director of Corporate Ethics and Compliance, a position that had been created specifically for her. Her work had transformed the company's approach to financial oversight and employee protection. The office was bright and spacious, with a view of the park where she often saw families playing during her lunch breaks. It was a far cry from the cramped cubicle she had occupied 3 years ago, and light years away from the hospital break room where she used to eat dinner during her night shifts. "Mom, this is so cool." Emma bounded into the office, her backpack bouncing as she ran to the window. "You can see the whole city from here." Elena smiled. It was a teacher workday and Emma was spending the afternoon at the office. At 8 years old, Emma had adapted well to their new life. She was thriving in her new school, had made good friends, and seemed to have processed her father's absence with remarkable resilience. "What do you think, sweetheart? Do you like Mommy's new office?" "It's awesome. Can I do my homework here sometimes?" "We'll see." Elena had worked hard to create a stable, secure environment for Emma. They lived in a 2-bedroom apartment in a safe neighborhood. Emma was enrolled in an excellent school, and for the first time in years, Elena didn't have to worry about money. But more than the financial security, Elena had found something she had lost during her marriage: her sense of self-worth. She was respected at work, her opinions were valued, and she had the authority to make real changes in the company. "Ms. Rivers?" Elena turned to see Margaret Chin in the doorway. "I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's someone here to see you." Elena's heart skipped a beat. Richard was still in prison, but she had learned to be cautious about unexpected visitors. "Who is it?" "It's Patricia Williams, the auditor who worked on the Monroe case. She says she has something important to discuss with you." Elena told Emma to stay in the office and color while she went to meet with Patricia. She found the auditor in the small conference room, looking professional but excited. "Elena, I hope you don't mind me dropping by, but I have some news that I thought you'd want to hear in person." "Of course. What's going on?" Patricia opened a folder and pulled out several documents. "We've been working with the district attorney's office on asset recovery in the Monroe case. We've been able to trace some of the stolen money and recover assets that were purchased with fraudulent funds." "That's good news." "It's better than good news. We've recovered approximately $60,000 in assets, and the court has ordered restitution. But here's the interesting part. Mr. Monroe has no assets to satisfy the restitution order. However, the court has also ordered him to pay back child support, and they've garnished his prison wages." Elena was confused. "I don't understand what this has to do with me." "The company has decided to use a portion of the recovered assets to establish a scholarship fund for employees' children who have been affected by workplace misconduct. Emma would be the first recipient." Elena's eyes widened. "What does that mean?" "It means that Emma's education from now through college will be fully funded. The scholarship covers tuition, books, and educational expenses." Elena felt tears welling up in her eyes. "I don't know what to say." "You don't have to say anything. This is the company's way of acknowledging that Emma was also a victim of her father's crimes." After Patricia left, Elena sat in the conference room for a few minutes, overwhelmed by the news. Emma's future was now secure in ways that Elena had never dared to hope for. When she returned to her office, she found Emma drawing pictures at the small table Elena had set up for her. "Mommy, are you okay? You look like you're crying." Elena knelt down beside her daughter. "I'm crying because I'm happy, sweetheart. Something wonderful just happened." "What?" "I'll tell you later. Right now, I just want to hug you." As Elena held Emma, she thought about the journey that had brought them to this moment. 2 years ago, she had been humiliated and broken, struggling to survive after her marriage collapsed. Now she was successful, respected, and secure. But the real victory wasn't in the job or the money or even the justice that had been served. The real victory was in the fact that she had refused to let Richard's betrayal define her. She had refused to become bitter or vengeful. She had simply insisted on doing what was right, even when it was difficult. That afternoon, Elena received an unexpected phone call. It was James Ellison. "Elena, I have a proposition for you. I've been asked to speak at a conference on corporate ethics next month, and I'd like you to co-present with me." "Really? What would I talk about?" "Your story. How you discovered the fraud, how you handled the situation, and what we've learned about preventing similar incidents." Elena hesitated. She had avoided most media attention during the legal proceedings, preferring to let her work speak for itself. "I don't know, James. I'm not sure I want to be the face of this story." "Elena, you've become a role model for a lot of people. Your integrity and courage have inspired others to speak up when they see wrongdoing. I think your story could help other companies prevent fraud and protect employees." Elena thought about it for a moment. "Can I think about it?" "Of course. But Elena, I want you to know that what you did changed this company for the better. We're stronger and more ethical because of your courage." That evening, Elena and Emma went to their favorite restaurant to celebrate Elena's promotion. As they shared a dessert, Emma asked, "Mommy, do you ever miss being married to Daddy?" Elena considered the question carefully. "I miss being married, sweetheart. I miss having a partner and thinking we were building a life together. But I don't miss the person your father became." "Do you think you'll get married again?" "Maybe someday. But only if I find someone who treats us both with respect and kindness." "Like Mr. Thompson?" Elena smiled. David Thompson was Emma's soccer coach, a gentle man who had been asking Elena out for coffee for months. Elena had been hesitant to date, but lately she had been thinking it might be time to open that door. "Maybe like Mr. Thompson," she said. As they walked home from the restaurant, Elena felt a sense of peace she hadn't experienced in years. She had faced her fears, stood up for what was right, and built a new life based on integrity and hard work. Richard Monroe was serving his time in prison, and Elena had heard through mutual acquaintances that he was finally getting the counseling he needed. She hoped he would emerge from prison as a better person, for Emma's sake if not for his own. Bianca had moved to another state and was reportedly working as a real estate agent. Elena bore her no ill will. Bianca had been as much a victim of Richard's deception as anyone else. But Elena's focus was on the future now. She had work she loved, a daughter who was thriving, and for the first time in years she was open to the possibility of love again. The woman who had once been humiliated in a parking lot by her husband's mistress was now a successful executive, a single mother who had triumphed over adversity, and a role model for integrity in the workplace. Elena Rivers had won not through revenge or bitterness, but through courage, hard work, and an unwavering commitment to doing what was right. 2 years later, Elena stood at the podium of the National Conference on Corporate Ethics, looking out at an audience of over 500 business leaders, executives, and compliance officers. She had given this presentation dozens of times now, but it still felt surreal to be recognized as an expert in corporate governance and whistleblower protection. Integrity isn't just about doing the right thing when it's easy, she said, her voice confident and clear. It's about doing the right thing when it's hard, when it's costly, when it means standing up to people who have power over you. In the audience, she could see James Ellison nodding approvingly. He was now more than just her boss. He had become a mentor and friend. The success of Bexford Enterprises' ethics program had made both of them sought-after speakers in the corporate world. When I discovered financial irregularities in my ex-husband's expense reports, I had a choice, Elena continued. I could ignore what I had found or I could report it, knowing that doing so would have serious consequences for someone I once loved. Elena had refined her story over the years, focusing on the professional aspects rather than the personal drama. She had learned to talk about the situation with objectivity and even compassion for Richard, who had paid a heavy price for his crimes. The choice to report fraud is never easy, but it's necessary. Companies must create environments where employees feel safe to report wrongdoing without fear of retaliation. After her presentation, Elena was approached by a young woman in her 20s who looked nervous but determined. Ms. Rivers, thank you for your presentation. I'm Sarah Mitchell and I work for a tech company in Seattle. I think I'm seeing something similar to what you discovered, but I'm scared to report it. Elena had fielded dozens of similar questions over the years. What are you afraid of? The person involved is my supervisor's brother-in-law. I'm worried that if I report this I'll lose my job. Elena handed Sarah her business card. Call me next week. We'll talk through your options and help you understand your legal protections. This had become an unexpected part of Elena's new role. She had become an informal advisor to employees across the country who were struggling with ethical dilemmas in their workplaces. It was rewarding work, and it made her feel like her difficult experience had meaning beyond her own life. After the conference, Elena flew back home to find Emma waiting for her at the airport with David Thompson. Elena and David had been dating for over a year now, and their relationship had developed slowly and carefully. David was patient, kind, and understood that Elena needed to prioritize Emma's well-being above everything else. How did it go? David asked as he took her suitcase. Really well. I think we're making a difference. Emma bounced excitedly beside them. Mom, guess what? I made the honor roll again, and Coach David took me for ice cream to celebrate. Elena smiled. That's wonderful, sweetheart. As they drove home, Elena reflected on how much their lives had changed. Emma was now 10 years old, confident and happy. She saw her father twice a month during supervised visits since his release from prison 6 months ago. Richard was working at a warehouse and living in a small apartment trying to rebuild his life. The visits were awkward but necessary. Richard was genuinely trying to be a better father, and Emma deserved the chance to have a relationship with him. Elena had made peace with this arrangement, though she maintained strict boundaries. Elena, David said as they pulled into her driveway, there's something I wanted to talk to you about. Emma had already run into the house, eager to show Elena her latest school project. Elena and David sat in the car for a moment. What's on your mind? David looked nervous, which was unusual for him. I've been thinking about our future. About Emma's future. About what we're building together. Elena's heart started beating faster. David, I know this is a big step, and I know you need to be careful about who you let into Emma's life. But I love you, Elena. I love both of you. And I want to ask you to marry me. Elena stared at him for a moment, then started laughing. That's not the reaction I was hoping for, David said with a confused smile. I'm sorry, I'm not laughing at you. I'm laughing because 2 years ago I thought my life was over. I thought I would never trust anyone again, never be happy again. And now, and now, and now I'm sitting in a car with a man who loves me and my daughter, who respects us both, who has never tried to control me or diminish me. Yes, David. Yes, I'll marry you. They decided to tell Emma together. She was in the living room working on a puzzle when they sat down beside her. Emma, sweetheart, David and I have something to tell you, Elena said. Emma looked up with interest. Are you going to get married? Elena and David exchanged surprised looks. How did you know that? David asked. Because you've been acting weird all week and you keep looking at Mom like she's the most beautiful person in the world. Elena laughed. Is that okay with you? Would you be happy if David became your stepfather? Emma jumped up and hugged them both. Yes. Can I call you Dad? David's eyes filled with tears. I would be honored if you called me Dad. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Elena and David sat on the porch, planning their future. It would be a small wedding, just family and close friends. They would move into David's house, which had a big backyard where Emma could play. David would formally adopt Emma after they were married. Elena, David said, I want you to know that I understand what you've been through. I understand why trust doesn't come easily for you. I want you to know that I will never take you for granted. I know, Elena said. That's why I'm saying yes. The next morning, Elena went to her office to find flowers on her desk and a note from James Ellison. Congratulations on your engagement. You deserve all the happiness in the world. Elena had never told James about David's proposal, but news traveled fast in their small office. How did you know? She asked when James stopped by her office later. David called me last week to ask for my blessing. Apparently, he considers me family since I gave you your second chance. Elena was touched. Over the years, James had become more than just her boss. He had been her advocate, her mentor, and in many ways, a father figure. What did you tell him? I told him that you're the strongest, most ethical person I've ever worked with, and that he'd better treat you like the treasure you are. And what did he say? He said he already knew that. As the months passed and Elena planned her wedding, she often thought about the journey that had brought her to this point. 5 years ago, she had been a broken woman, humiliated and financially desperate. Now she was a successful executive, a respected speaker, and a woman about to marry a man who valued her strength rather than trying to diminish it. Richard had been invited to the wedding, though Elena knew he wouldn't come. He had sent Emma a card congratulating her on gaining a new stepfather, and Elena appreciated the gesture. Richard was trying to be a better person, and Elena hoped he would succeed for Emma's sake. Bianca had also reached out recently, sending Elena a letter of apology. She was engaged to a teacher and working as a guidance counselor at a high school. She had found her own path to redemption, and Elena was glad for her. The wedding was beautiful. Elena wore a simple but elegant dress, and Emma served as her maid of honor. James Ellison walked Elena down the aisle, since her own father had passed away years earlier. As Elena and David exchanged vows, Elena promised to love, honor, and respect him, and to build a life based on honesty and integrity. David promised to cherish both Elena and Emma, and to never take their trust for granted. Looking out at the small gathering of friends and family, Elena felt overwhelmed with gratitude. These were people who had supported her through her darkest moments and celebrated her victories. After the ceremony, as she danced with her new husband, Elena thought about the woman she had been 5 years ago. That woman had been afraid, broken, and convinced that she would never be happy again. But that woman had also been brave. She had refused to let her ex-husband's betrayal define her. She had insisted on doing what was right even when it was difficult. She had rebuilt her life with integrity and hard work. And now, Elena Rivers Thompson was living proof that sometimes, when you choose courage over comfort, when you choose integrity over revenge, when you choose to rebuild rather than retreat, you don't just survive, you thrive. The woman who had once been deliberately humiliated by her husband's mistress in a parking lot was now a successful executive, a respected advocate for corporate ethics, a loving mother, and a happy wife. Elena had won not through revenge or bitterness, but through the quiet power of living with integrity. And her victory was complete. As the evening wound down and the last guests departed, Elena stood in her new home with her new husband and her daughter, looking at the life they had built together. "Are you happy, Mom?" Emma asked. Elena smiled, thinking of all the struggles and triumphs that had brought them to this moment. "I'm very happy, sweetheart. We all are." And for the first time in her adult life, Elena Rivers Thompson felt truly, completely at peace.